The crystal champagne flute shattered against the wall, missing my head by inches. The elegant dining room of the Emerald Room fell silent, 20 pairs of eyes fixed on us. Ethan's handprint burned red across my cheek, his perfect smile twisted into something unrecognizable. I touched my face, fingers trembling, as he lunged toward me again. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. You think you're so clever, he hissed, his voice barely audible over the ringing in my ears. I straightened my spine and met his gaze. No, Ethan, I think you're predictable. With steady hands, I withdrew a folder from my purse and placed it on the table between us. The Pinnacle Tech logo gleamed under the chandelier light. Would anyone like to know who really owns 60% of my fiancé's company? I asked the stunned room. That's when Ethan Reynolds, Seattle's golden boy of tech, realized he'd just slapped his primary investor in front of everyone who mattered. The engagement ring on my finger had felt perfect 8 hours earlier. 12 carats, emerald-cut diamond, custom platinum band, as unique as you are, Ethan had whispered when he proposed 3 months ago. Aunt May had fallen unusually silent when I showed her, her weathered hands cradling mine with a gentleness that contradicted the storm brewing in her eyes. Olivia, she said now, her voice cutting through the ambient jazz as we sat in a quiet corner of the Emerald Room before the engagement dinner officially began. There's trouble following this man. I adjusted the napkin on my lap, fighting the urge to roll my eyes. Aunt May, we've been through this. Ethan is respected throughout the tech industry. Pinnacle is projected to go public next year. Projections can be manipulated, she countered, her accent thickening as it always did when she was concerned. I've been reading financial statements since before you were born. His company's numbers don't add up. The restaurant buzzed around us, Seattle's elite mingling in their finest. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Space Needle glowed against the darkening sky, the persistent drizzle casting everything in a dreamlike haze. I spotted my brother Ryan at the bar, deep in conversation with Ethan, both men in tailored suits but possessing fundamentally different energies. Ryan solid and grounded, Ethan electric and impossible to ignore. You've only met him 3 times, I reminded her gently. 3 times is enough. The shadows around him grow darker each time I see him. I suppressed a sigh. Aunt May had raised me after my parents died, had taught me everything about business and investment. Her instincts had built our family fortune, but her talk of shadows and energies belonged to the old world she'd left behind in Taiwan, not the data-driven decisions that had made Horizon Ventures, my investment firm, one of Seattle's most respected. He looks at you like you're an acquisition, she said bluntly, not a partner. Before I could respond, Ethan appeared at my side, champagne in hand, his other arm sliding possessively around my waist. Mrs. Chen. He nodded respectfully to my aunt. I hope you're enjoying yourself. The food is excellent, she replied, her expression giving nothing away. Only the best for our Olivia. His grip tightened slightly around my waist. Although I'm sure you taught her to expect nothing less. A server approached with hors d'oeuvres, breaking the tension. Ethan excused himself to greet more guests, leaving a lingering kiss on my temple. His smile doesn't reach his eyes, Aunt May murmured once he was out of earshot. That's enough, I said firmly. This is my engagement dinner. Can we please just enjoy it? She patted my hand, a gesture she'd used since I was a child. Of course, Nyang. But remember, in business and in love, due diligence is everything. Ryan approached, champagne in hand, his expression unreadable. Everything okay over here? Just family gossip, I assured him with a smile that felt tight around the edges. Interesting, he said, his gaze following Ethan across the room. Because I just had a fascinating conversation with your fiancé about Series B funding rounds. He's excited about Pinnacle's growth, I replied. You know how founders are, always pitching. Ryan's eyebrow arched. He asked specifically about your client portfolio, the private one. Something cold settled in my stomach. The private portfolio was where I kept my highest risk, highest reward investments. Information not even Ethan should know existed. He probably heard me mention it on a call, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Olivia. Ryan lowered his voice. Have you looked into his previous startups, before Pinnacle? Of course I have. 2 failed ventures, but that's normal in tech. Most successful founders fail before they succeed. And his education? Stanford Tech program, right? Yes, with honors. Why? Ryan exchanged a look with Aunt May that made my irritation spike. I have a friend who teaches there. He's never heard of Ethan Reynolds. That's ridiculous. I've seen his diploma. Diplomas can be bought, Aunt May said quietly. I can't believe you two. I stood, smoothing the silk of my emerald dress. It's my engagement dinner. Could you please just be happy for me? Ryan caught my arm gently. We are happy if you're happy, Liv. But something isn't right here. His financial disclosures for the prenup. We're all in order, I finished firmly. Zoe reviewed everything. Zoe Williams had been my attorney since I started Horizon Ventures. She was meticulous to a fault. Zoe reviewed what he provided. Ryan countered, that doesn't mean it was everything. Across the room, Ethan clinked a knife against his glass, drawing everyone's attention. His smile was magnetic, his presence commanding. This was the man who had swept me off my feet with his vision for Pinnacle Tech, a revolutionary healthcare platform that would make medical care accessible to underserved communities. The man who quoted poetry during business meetings and knew exactly how I took my coffee. The man who was now raising a toast to our future together. To my brilliant, beautiful Olivia, he called out, his voice carrying effortlessly. Who sees potential where others see risk? I'm the luckiest man in Seattle tonight. Glasses raised around the room. I forced a smile, trying to ignore the doubt that had planted itself in my mind. As I moved to join Ethan at the center of the room, my phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. Call me ASAP. Found something concerning in the Pinnacle Tech filing. I slipped the phone back into my clutch, heart racing. This wasn't the time. Whatever it was could wait until tomorrow. But as Ethan's arm circled my waist again, his fingers digging slightly into my hip, I couldn't shake Aunt May's words. The shadows around him grow darker each time I see him. The dinner portion of the evening progressed with appropriate elegance, locally. Sourced seafood, paired wines, and conversation that flowed as freely as the champagne. I found myself watching Ethan with new eyes, noting how he deftly redirected questions about Pinnacle's technology, how his charm intensified when speaking to potential investors, how his attention constantly scanned the room even when supposedly focused on me. As dessert was being served, Ethan excused himself to make a call. Professional habit made me check my watch. 11:23 p.m. Too late for a business call unless something was wrong. When he didn't return after 15 minutes, I found myself following the path he'd taken toward the restaurant's private back rooms. The hallway was dimly lit, lined with vintage photographs of Seattle's history. I heard his voice before I saw him, intense, angry, nothing like the smooth tones he used in public. It has to be tomorrow. She's already asking questions. A pause. No, her attorney found something. I don't know what yet, but we need to move the timeline up. I froze, pressing myself against the wall. Once the marriage license is signed, it doesn't matter what they find. The community property laws in Washington are crystal clear. Yes, I know how much money we're talking about. 50-50, just like we planned. My blood turned to ice. The prenup would protect my existing assets, but not necessarily my ongoing investments, including the anonymous ones I'd made in Pinnacle Tech through a shell corporation, a strategy I'd used to avoid conflict of interest accusations while supporting Ethan's vision. Just have the accounts ready, he continued. Cayman, just like last time with Diana. No, she doesn't suspect anything. She thinks I'm her dream come true. Diana. The name registered faintly. Hadn't there been a Diana mentioned in his past? Not an ex-girlfriend as he'd claimed, but an ex-fiancé? I must have made a sound because suddenly Ethan went silent. I quickly retreated down the hallway, heart hammering, and nearly collided with Ryan. Whoa, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost, he said, steadying me. I need to leave, I whispered, now. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Ryan's expression hardened. What did he do? Not here. I glanced back toward the private rooms. Get Aunt May. Tell her we had an emergency at Horizon. Meet me at the office in 30 minutes. Liv, please, Ryan. Trust me on this. He nodded once and disappeared back into the main dining room. I took a moment to compose myself, straightening my spine and fixing my expression into something resembling normalcy. When I returned to the table, Ethan was already there, all smiles and attentiveness. Everything okay? He asked. You disappeared. Just touching base with the office, I lied smoothly. A situation with our Tokyo investment. His smile didn't falter, but something calculated flickered in his eyes. Nothing serious, I hope. Unfortunately, yes. I hate to cut the evening short, but I need to handle this personally. Tonight? His tone remained light, but his fingers tightened around his water glass. Surely it can wait until morning. International markets don't sleep, darling. I forced a regretful smile. You know how it is. Of course. He stood, all perfect understanding. Let me come with you. I can help. No need to ruin both our evenings. I kissed his cheek. Stay. Enjoy dessert with our guests. I'll call you once it's handled. The battle played out behind his eyes. Insistence might reveal too much concern, but letting me go alone was clearly not part of his plan. Perfect understanding won out. If you're sure, he conceded, take the car service. I don't want you driving if you're stressed. Always thinking of me. I squeezed his hand, fighting the urge to recoil. 20 minutes later, I sat in my Pioneer. Square office, the Seattle skyline glittering through rain-streaked windows. My hands trembled as I logged into systems I rarely accessed personally. Security protocols, investment trails, background check databases. By the time Ryan and Aunt May arrived, I had already uncovered enough to make me physically ill. Ethan Reynolds isn't his real name, I told them without preamble. It's Eric Reeves. He changed it 5 years ago after his second startup collapsed amid fraud allegations. Ryan swore under his breath. Aunt May remained silent, her expression vindicated but not triumphant. Diana Foster, I continued, pulling up a news article, was his fiancée in San Francisco. She came from a wealthy family with deep ties to venture capital. After their engagement, her family invested heavily in his medical records company. 3 months after the wedding, the company announced breakthrough technology that never materialized. By the time investigators got involved, the money was gone. Diana's family lost everything. And Diana? Aunt May asked quietly. Committed suicide 6 months later. The office fell silent except for the gentle hum of computers and the distant wail of a ferry horn on Elliott Bay. There's more, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Remember Pinnacle's miraculous seed funding round last year? The anonymous investor who believed so much in Ethan's vision? Ryan's eyes widened. Tell me you didn't. I did. I pulled up the investment documents. Through a shell corporation to avoid ethical conflicts, I own 60% of Pinnacle Tech. He doesn't know? Ryan asked. The investment was anonymous. Only my financial team and Zoe know. Even the board members at Pinnacle think it's a group of foreign investors. I laughed bitterly. I funded my own engagement ring. The prenup, Ryan began, protects my declared assets, I finished, but Washington is a community property state. If we marry, he could claim I concealed assets that should be jointly owned, given the timeline of investment and our relationship. He could take control of his company using your own money, Aunt May concluded. Clever boy. It gets worse, I said, opening an email from Zoe that had just arrived. The technology Pinnacle is supposedly developing? It doesn't exist. The patents are hollow, impressive language describing impossible processes. The clinical trials they've reported to investors were fabricated. The whole company is smoke and mirrors. How did you miss this? Ryan asked, not unkindly. I stared at my hands, at the massive diamond catching the office lights. I wanted to believe. No, Aunt May said firmly. You wanted to love. There is no shame in that. My phone buzzed with Ethan's face lighting up the screen. I declined the call. He'll be here soon, I said. The second I left that dinner, his plan was compromised. He won't wait until tomorrow now. What do you want to do? Ryan asked. I looked between my brother and my aunt, the two people who had always seen me clearly, even when I couldn't see myself. I want to take back what's mine. The rain intensified, drumming against the windows as we formulated a plan. By the time the security desk called to announce Ethan's arrival, I was ready. I instructed them to send him up. When the elevator doors opened, he stepped out looking concerned but composed, an overnight bag in hand. The perfect supportive fiancé coming to help in a crisis. Olivia, he said, taking in Ryan and Aunt May with barely concealed annoyance. How's the Tokyo situation? Fascinating, I replied, leaning against my desk, especially since we don't have any investments in Tokyo. The shift was subtle, a tightening around his eyes, a recalculation happening behind them. Must have misheard you at dinner. Must have, I agreed. Kind of like how I misheard your entire life story, Eric. The name hit him like a physical blow. For a split second, his mask slipped completely, revealing something cold and dangerous beneath. Then the charming smile was back, albeit strained. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, setting down his bag. You're obviously stressed about something. Diana Foster, I cut in. Does that name stress you out? How about Charles Foster? I spoke with him an hour ago. Interesting man, still rebuilding his life after his daughter's suicide. Ethan's posture changed, becoming more alert, predatory. He glanced at the door, calculating. Ryan knows 6 different martial arts, I said conversationally. Just in case you're wondering about your odds. Whatever you think you know, he began. I know everything. I opened my laptop, turning it to face him. Your real name? The companies you've destroyed? The investigations in California and Oregon? The offshore accounts where you've been transferring Pinnacle's development funds? Shall I continue? He laughed, an ugly sound nothing like the warm chuckle I'd fallen for. Prove it. You think you're the first rich girl to have regrets after saying yes? I have contracts, investments, a paper trail a mile long showing your involvement. By the time my lawyers are done, you'll be lucky to keep this office. You're right about the paper trail, I agreed. But wrong about who it implicates. I slid a document across the desk. Remember this? The original operating agreement for Pinnacle Tech, listing E&O Investments as majority shareholder. So? His confidence didn't waver. E&O Investments is my shell corporation. I own 60% of Pinnacle, Ethan. I'm your boss. The blood drained from his face. You've been embezzling from me, I continued. Not your imaginary foreign investors. Every wire transfer, every misappropriated research grant, you were stealing from me while planning to steal even more through marriage. You're bluffing, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. The board has already been notified of an emergency meeting tomorrow morning. The FBI has the evidence of your wire transfers. Your accounts in the Caymans have been frozen pending investigation. I stepped closer. Game over. What happened next occurred so quickly I barely had time to process it. Ethan lunged toward my laptop, perhaps hoping to destroy evidence. Ryan intercepted him, but not before Ethan's hand connected with my face. In a slap that echoed through the office, pain blossomed across my cheek. The same cheek that had burned at the Emerald Room hours later, when I deliberately provoked him in front of our guests by revealing who really owned his company. As security led him away, spitting threats and accusations, I touched my face, feeling oddly calm. Aunt May approached, her small hand cool against my skin. "When a tiger shows its teeth," she said softly in Mandarin, "wise people believe it." I nodded, watching Ethan's retreating figure. "I should have listened to you." "You listened when it mattered," she replied. "Some lessons must be learned firsthand." Later that night, as rain pounded against the windows of my apartment overlooking Lake Union, I removed the massive diamond ring and placed it in a small box. Evidence now, not a promise. My phone had been buzzing nonstop. Concerned dinner guests, business associates alerted to the situation at Pinnacle, reporters already catching wind of the scandal. One message caught my attention. An unknown number with a San Francisco area code. "This is Diana Foster. I heard you might need someone to talk to." Diana Foster. Not dead after all. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Another lie meant to generate sympathy, to paint Ethan as a wounded man who had suffered loss. How many other lies had I built my love upon? I texted back a simple reply. Very much alive. Very much interested. As Seattle's lights reflected on the dark water outside, I realized that what hurt most wasn't the betrayal or the public humiliation. It was the death of possibility. The future I had imagined with a man who had never actually existed. My phone buzzed with a response from Diana. "He doesn't get to win. Not this time." Despite everything, I smiled. Maybe there was a different kind of possibility emerging from these ashes. Not the partnership I had envisioned, but an alliance of a different sort. Women comparing notes, connecting patterns, preventing the next victim. I glanced at my laptop, where the Pinnacle Tech logo still glowed on the screen. The company name would need to change, the business model completely overhauled. But underneath the fraud and embellishment, the core idea remained valuable. Healthcare technology that could actually help people rather than just enrich investors. Rebuilding would be harder than starting fresh. Facing the board, the investigators, the inevitable media scrutiny, none of it would be easy. But I hadn't built Horizon Ventures by taking the easy path. Ryan had asked earlier why I hadn't discovered Ethan's deception sooner. The truth was both simple and painful. I hadn't looked. I'd fallen for the narrative, brilliant visionary founder disrupting healthcare, because it aligned with how I wanted to see myself as an investor. Making money while making a difference. The perfect partnership, personal and professional. I opened my email and began composing a message to Zoe. There would be legal battles ahead, reputation management, difficult conversations with investors. But first, there would be truth. Ugly, complicated, necessary truth. Outside, the rain finally began to ease, leaving Seattle washed clean in the pre-dawn light. The diamond ring caught the first rays of morning sun, breaking them into prisms. Across my wall. Beautiful, valuable, and ultimately meaningless without integrity behind it. Like Ethan himself. I closed the ring box decisively. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now, I had survived the night. The shadows Aunt May had seen were no longer hidden. They had stepped into the light, been named, and in being named, lost some of their power. As I finally drifted toward sleep, my last conscious thought was of Diana Foster. very much alive, and unwilling to let the past define her future. There was wisdom there, and perhaps eventually, even hope. Morning arrived with a pounding headache and 17 missed calls from Ethan. I silenced my phone and made coffee, watching fog roll across Lake Union as ferries cut through the water below. Seattle looked different today, the familiar skyline, suddenly foreign, as if I was seeing it through someone else's eyes. Perhaps I was. The woman who had fallen for Ethan Reynolds no longer existed. A gentle knock at my door announced Ryan's arrival. He'd insisted on staying in my guest room, concerned about what Ethan might do when cornered. My brother looked as exhausted as I felt, but he'd brought fresh pastries from my favorite bakery in Pike Place Market. "Zoe called," he said, setting a croissant in front of me. "She's expedited the paperwork to remove Ethan from Pinnacles." "Leadership. The board's called an emergency session for noon." I nodded, unable to summon enthusiasm even for this small victory. "And the FBI?" "Moving carefully. They want to track the money trail completely before making arrests." Ryan hesitated. "Diana Foster is flying in this afternoon. She wants to meet." My stomach tightened. The woman Ethan had claimed was dead, his previous fiancée, was now a living, breathing complication in an already overwhelming situation. Did she say why? Just that she has information we need, and that she's not the only one. I raised an eyebrow. "Apparently," Ryan continued, "there was someone before Diana, and possibly someone between Diana and you." The croissant turned to ash in my mouth. "A pattern. A professional con man," Ryan corrected. "He targets successful women in tech and finance, creates a company that aligns perfectly with their investment interests, then uses romance to gain their trust and access to their resources." My phone buzzed with an unknown number. I answered on speaker. "Ms. Chen, this is Detective Morgan with Seattle PD. We have a situation at your office building. Ethan Reynolds attempted to access your private servers early this morning. Security detained him, but he's claiming he was retrieving personal property with your permission." I exchanged glances with Ryan. "That's absolutely false, Detective. Mr. Reynolds has no authority to access anything at Horizon Ventures." "Understood. We're holding him for now, but without formal charges." "I'll be there in 30 minutes with my attorney," I said firmly. "Please don't release him until we arrive." After ending the call, I moved with newfound purpose, the fog of confusion burning away under the heat of anger. Ethan wasn't just running, he was still actively trying to steal from me. "Call Aunt May," I told Ryan. "Then contact every major investor in Pinnacle. They deserve to hear what's happening from me before it hits the press." By the time we reached Pioneer Square, media vans were already gathering outside my office building. Someone had tipped them off, likely Ethan himself, creating public pressure for his release. I slipped in through the service entrance, Zoe Williams already waiting in the security office where Ethan was being held. He looked up as I entered, his expression transforming from belligerence to calculated charm. "Olivia, thank God. Tell these people there's been a misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding," I replied evenly, "was mine in ever trusting you." Detective Morgan, a compact woman with shrewd eyes, observed our exchange carefully. "Mr. Reynolds was found attempting to override security protocols on your server room door at 5:17 this morning. Security footage shows him using a copied access card." "I forgot some personal files," Ethan explained smoothly. "Given the tension last night, I didn't want to bother Olivia. This whole situation has spiraled from a personal disagreement into something unnecessarily dramatic." "Personal disagreement," I repeated, rage simmering beneath my controlled exterior. "Is that what you call identity fraud, embezzlement, and attempting to defraud investors?" His eyes hardened. "Careful, sweetheart. Defamation is a serious charge." "Truth is an absolute defense against defamation," Zoe interjected, opening her briefcase. "Detective, We're prepared to file formal charges for corporate espionage, wire fraud, identity theft, and assault. Assault? Ethan laughed incredulously. Olivia, this is insane. You slapped me across the face in front of witnesses, I reminded him. But that's the least of your concerns right now. I turned to Detective Morgan. I've authorized a forensic team to examine exactly what Mr. Reynolds was attempting to access. Preliminary reports suggest he was targeting confidential investor information and attempting to transfer proprietary technology data outside our secure network. Ethan's facade cracked slightly. You have no proof. Actually, Ryan said from the doorway, we do. Our security systems log every attempted access, successful or not, including the 3 attempts you made remotely before deciding to break in physically. I want my lawyer, Ethan said flatly. Excellent idea, Detective Morgan agreed, producing handcuffs. Ethan Reynolds, you're under arrest for criminal trespass and attempted unauthorized computer access. You have the right to remain silent. As they led him away, Ethan locked eyes with me. This isn't over, Olivia. You have no idea what you're dealing with. The threat lingered in the air long after he'd gone. He's right about one thing, Zoe said, gathering her documents. This is just beginning. Once the Financial Crimes Unit gets involved, this will become very complex very quickly. I nodded, suddenly exhausted again. What about Pinnacle? The company itself isn't fraudulent, just its founder and much of its reported progress. That's a separate battle, Zoe advised. Right now, we need to focus on containing the damage to Horizon and protecting your personal assets. Ethan will post bail quickly, and we need to be prepared for what comes next. What came next arrived sooner than expected. By noon, as I sat with the Pinnacle board explaining the situation, images from our engagement dinner began circulating online. Specifically, the moment after Ethan had slapped me, carefully framed, to make it appear that I had provoked him physically. He's controlling the narrative, Ryan muttered, showing me the posts spreading across social media, making himself the victim. The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. These were experienced business leaders, but the personal drama clearly made them uneasy. Gentlemen, I addressed them directly. I understand this is uncomfortable. It should be. You've been deceived by a con man who has done this before. The technology you believed you were investing in doesn't exist in the form described in your prospectus. The clinical trial data was fabricated. If that's true, said Warren Blackwell, the lead independent director, then you, as majority shareholder through E&O Investments, are equally culpable for the misrepresentation. I invested in Pinnacle because I believed in its mission, I countered. Making healthcare more accessible through technology is still a worthy goal. But Ethan Reynolds, or Eric Reeves, which is his real name, diverted development funds to personal accounts and misrepresented the technology's readiness. I distributed folders containing documentation of the fraud. My investment firm conducted standard due diligence, but Ethan created an elaborate fiction supported by falsified documents. I'm as much a victim of this fraud as any other investor. This is disturbing, admitted Javier Suarez, examining the evidence, but salvageable. The core patents, while perhaps exaggerated in their current implementation, appear to have genuine potential. That's why I'm here, I said. I'm not abandoning Pinnacle. I'm proposing a restructuring with complete transparency. Replace Ethan with a qualified CEO, bring in legitimate technical leadership, and rebuild on honest foundations. The discussion continued for hours, moving from shock to anger to pragmatic problem-solving. By the time we adjourned, a tentative plan was in place. Ethan would be removed as CEO, the company would issue a carefully worded statement to investors, and an interim leadership team would evaluate the true state of the technology. As I left the Pinnacle offices, my phone rang with Aunt May's number. Diana Foster has arrived, she said without preamble. She's at your apartment with a woman named Jessica Winters. They say there are others. Others? More victims, Aunt May clarified. A pattern stretching back 8 years. My driver navigated through afternoon traffic as rain began to fall again, blurring the city into watercolor smudges. I tried to prepare myself for meeting the woman Ethan had claimed was dead, the woman whose supposed suicide had elicited my deepest sympathy and created an emotional connection that had fast-tracked our relationship. When I entered my apartment, 4 women waited in my living room. Aunt May poured tea with ceremonial precision, her calming presence a counterpoint to the nervous energy filling the space. "Olivia," she said, "this is Diana Foster, Jessica Winters, Vanessa Kapoor, and Michelle Tran." Diana stepped forward first, tall, poised with the kind of confidence that comes from rebuilding yourself from ashes. "Thank you for meeting with us. I know this day has been challenging." "That's one word for it," I managed, accepting the tea Aunt May offered. "I thought you were dead." "That's his favorite story," Diana said with a brittle smile. "The tragic, dead fiancé? It creates instant intimacy, doesn't it? Makes you want to heal him." Jessica nodded. "With me, it was a dying mother he was supporting. Made all his financial urgency seem noble rather than suspicious." "Cancer research startup," Vanessa added. "He called himself Evan Reynolds then. Said his mother had died of a rare cancer, and he was developing targeted therapies. So when he needed emergency funding to save the breakthrough from competitors, how could I refuse?" Michelle remained silent, studying me with evaluating eyes. "How did you all find each other?" I asked. "I started looking after I lost everything," Diana explained. "Found Jessica through a tech forum where she'd warned about a similar scam. Vanessa came later, through a private investigator I hired. Michelle reached out yesterday after seeing news about Pinnacle's founder online." "He's careful," Jessica continued. "Changes just enough details each time to avoid obvious patterns. Different names, different industries, different approaches tailored to each target." "But the same man," I finished. "How much did you lose?" The numbers they shared made my stomach clench. Collectively over $20 million. Careers derailed, reputations damaged, and emotional devastation that couldn't be quantified. "He's been arrested," I told them. "Breaking into my office this morning." "He'll make bail," Michelle spoke finely, her voice carrying the flat certainty of experience. "Then he'll disappear, resurface somewhere new, and start over. That's his pattern." "Not this time," Diana countered. "That's why we're here, Olivia. Together, we have enough evidence to build a case that will actually stick." My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "Ethan made bail. His lawyer is giving a press conference claiming corporate espionage by you against him. Turning on TV now." I grabbed the remote, switching to a local news channel. Ethan stood on the courthouse steps, looking appropriately shaken but resilient, a bandage on his temple that hadn't been there during his arrest. "My fiancée, Olivia Chen, discovered that my healthcare technology would compete with one of her existing investments," he was saying, voice catching with practiced emotion. "When I refused to sell her controlling interest in Pinnacle at a predatory valuation, she fabricated these allegations. I went to retrieve my personal research this morning only to be arrested on trumped-up charges." The reporter thrust a microphone closer. "Mr. Reynolds, there are reports of physical altercation at your engagement dinner last night." Ethan looked down, the picture of a man reluctantly addressing something painful. "Olivia has been under tremendous pressure recently. Her business has suffered several setbacks that she's kept hidden from investors. When I suggested she seek help managing her stress and anger issues, she became violent. I restrained her to protect myself and our guests. I'm heartbroken that our private struggles have become public spectacle." The women in my living room watched with expressions ranging from disgust to grim recognition. "Classic," Jessica muttered. "He's gaslighting you through the media." "Claiming you're unstable," Diana added. "It's what he did to me too." By the time I realized what was happening, I'd been painted as a mentally unbalanced woman who'd fabricated crimes against an innocent entrepreneur. "Did you actually try to commit suicide?" I asked quietly. Diana's expression darkened. "No. That was Eric's Ethan's contribution to the story. But I did have a breakdown after losing everything. He used that to strengthen his narrative." Vanessa leaned forward. "We need to coordinate our response. Separately, we're just disgruntled ex-fiancés making wild accusations. Together, we're a pattern of evidence." Michelle finally spoke again, her voice measured. "There's something none of you know yet. Something I just confirmed this morning." She placed a folder on my coffee table. "Eric Reeves isn't his real name either. Neither is Ethan Reynolds. His actual name is Edward Ratcliffe, and he's wanted in 3 states for fraud and identity theft." The revelation hit me like physical impact. Even knowing he was a con man, I'd still thought of him as Ethan, still believed that was at least partially real. "How did you find this out?" Diana asked, reaching for the folder. "I hired a specialist in identity fraud after losing my tech firm to him," Michelle explained. "It took nearly 2 years, but they finally traced him through facial recognition, software comparing driver's license photos across state databases." As the women discussed strategy, my phone lit up with calls from investors, reporters, and business associates. The story was exploding, and Ethan, Edward, was winning the public relations battle with his head start and sympathetic demeanor. "I need to make a statement," I realized aloud, "before this narrative solidifies." "Careful," Diana warned. "That's what he wants, to provoke you into looking emotional and unstable." The rain intensified outside, drumming against the windows, as a plan began to form in my mind. What if we all make a statement? Not just about the fraud, but about the pattern. 5 pairs of eyes turned to me with varying degrees of hope and skepticism. "He's counting on shame keeping us isolated," I continued, "on the embarrassment of being conned preventing us from speaking out. What if we refuse to be embarrassed? What if we own the narrative entirely?" "A joint press conference," Vanessa mused. "Strength in numbers." "Not just numbers," Michelle added. "Evidence. Documentation from each case showing the identical methods." "It would need to be bulletproof," Diana cautioned. "He'll sue for defamation the second we go public." "Let him," I said with newfound certainty. "Truth is an absolute defense, remember? And 5 women with paper trails across 8 years is a truth he can't escape." As we outlined our approach, another text from Ryan arrived. "Zoe says FBI is expanding investigation. They've frozen more accounts, including some we didn't know about. Ethan trying to liquidate assets quickly. He's preparing to run," Michelle translated when I shared the message. "We need to move fast." By evening, our impromptu war council had expanded to include Ryan, Zoe, and Aunt May. The coffee table disappeared under stacks of documents, financial records, communications, photographs, and legal filings that collectively told the story of a sophisticated predator who had refined his techniques with each new target. "The similarities are uncanny," Zoe observed, comparing investment documents from Pinnacle with those from Ethan's previous ventures. "Same clause structure, same vague technical language, even the same font in some sections." "He uses templates," Jessica confirmed, "adapts them for each new industry, but the bones remain the same." "What about his family?" Ryan asked. "Is there actually a mother? He mentioned a sister to me once." Diana shook her head. "The only real family member we've confirmed is his father, who disowned him years ago. We've never been able to locate him." "I think I might have," I said quietly, remembering an odd detail from my background check on Ethan months earlier. There was a Gregory Reynolds listed as a previous employer reference, but when my team called, the number was disconnected. I assumed it was just an outdated contact. "Gregory Reynolds," Michelle repeated, typing rapidly on her laptop. "Cross-referencing with Edward Ratcliffe. Wait." She turned the screen toward us. "There's a Gregory Ratcliffe, age 68, living in Bremerton, retired naval engineer. That's just across the Sound, Ryan noted. Less than an hour by ferry. Aunt May, who had been quietly observing until now, placed her teacup down with deliberate precision. The father may be the key. A man who creates false identities learned this behavior somewhere. Or from someone, Diana added. A plan crystallized as night fell over Seattle. While Zoe prepared legal documents to file first thing in the morning, Ryan coordinated with the FBI and Seattle PD to track Ethan's movements. Diana, Jessica, and Vanessa worked with a crisis management specialist to prepare their public statements, while Michelle continued her digital archaeology, uncovering more links between Ethan's various identities. I found myself standing at my window, watching the city lights shimmer through rain-streaked glass, when Aunt May joined me. "You're thinking of confronting the father," she said. It wasn't a question. Someone needs to. We need to understand what we're really dealing with. And you believe you're that someone? I turned to face her. I was engaged to him, Aunt May. I shared my life, my bed, my dreams with a complete stranger. I need answers no one else can give me. She studied me with eyes that had always seen more than I wanted them to. The answers you seek may not bring peace, Nyang. I don't need peace, I replied. I need truth. She nodded once, accepting my decision. Then I will accompany you. It could be dangerous. A rare smile crossed her face. I did not survive the Cultural Revolution and build a fortune in a foreign land by avoiding danger, child. Morning brought a brief respite from the rain as we boarded the ferry to Bremerton. Ryan had wanted to come, but someone needed to coordinate with the FBI as they traced Ethan's increasingly erratic financial movements. He'd emptied 3 accounts overnight and attempted to access Pinnacle's development server twice more. Bremerton emerged from the fog as our ferry approached, a former naval town with weathered charm and quiet streets. Gregory Ratcliffe's house sat on a bluff overlooking Puget Sound, a modest but well-maintained bungalow with a carefully tended garden. He's not expecting us, I reminded Aunt May as we walked up the path. Element of surprise, she replied calmly. Always advantageous. The man who answered the door bore a startling resemblance to Ethan. The same strong jawline and penetrating eyes, though weathered by decades of additional life. He assessed us quickly, wariness evident in his posture. "Mr. Ratcliffe?" I asked. "Depends who's asking," he replied, voice gruff but not hostile. "My name is Olivia Chen. This is my Aunt May Chen. Until yesterday, I was engaged to a man calling himself Ethan Reynolds. I believe he's your son, Edward." Something flickered in the older man's eyes. Recognition, resignation, perhaps even a flash of grief. "You'd better come in," he said after a long pause, stepping aside. "And for the record, I haven't seen my son in over 15 years. Not since he cleaned out my retirement account and disappeared." The interior of Gregory's home revealed a military precision. Everything in its place, surfaces dust-free, books and magazines neatly aligned. He led us to a small living room overlooking the water. "I assume Eddie's in trouble again," he said, lowering himself into an armchair. "It's why people find me, when they can find me at all." "Eddie?" I repeated, the diminutive jarringly at odds with the sophisticated predator I'd known. "Edward Allen Ratcliffe," Gregory clarified, "though I doubt he's used that name in years. What's he calling himself now? Ethan, you said?" "Ethan Reynolds," I confirmed. "He founded a healthcare technology company called Pinnacle Tech." Gregory gave a humorless laugh. "Let me guess. Revolutionary technology, going to change the world, just needs some capital to reach the finish line?" "You know his methods," Aunt May observed. "I taught him some of them," Gregory admitted, surprising me with his candor. "Not intentionally, mind you. I was naval intelligence before I became an engineer. Operational security, creating covers, maintaining legends. These were dinner table conversations in our house. Eddie absorbed it all, even as a child. And his mother? I asked. Died when he was 12. Cancer. Gregory's expression softened momentarily. The real tragedy in Eddie's life, not the fictional ones he invents to manipulate people. I digested this, thinking of how Ethan had used emotional vulnerability to fast-track intimacy between us. Mr. Ratcliffe, your son has defrauded multiple women across several states. He's currently attempting to flee while under federal investigation. We need to understand who we're dealing with. Gregory was silent for a long moment, staring out at the water. My son was always different. Brilliant, charismatic, but with something missing. Empathy, maybe, or some fundamental understanding of consequences. After his mother died, it got worse. By 16, he was running confidence schemes at school. By 20, he'd perfected the art of becoming whoever people wanted him to be. Why didn't you stop him? Aunt May asked. I tried, Gregory said sharply. Therapy, military school, even had him evaluated by specialists. Nothing worked. Then, he cleaned me out and vanished. New name, new life, new marks. He fixed me with a penetrating stare. How much did you lose? Financially? Less than he intended. Emotionally? I trailed off, unable to quantify the damage. Gregory nodded as if I'd confirmed something. He targets strong women, always has. The challenge excites him, breaking down someone who doesn't break easily. We're not broken, I said firmly. We're organizing. There are 5 of us now, comparing notes, building a case. Something like hope flickered across Gregory's weathered face. 5? That's more than I knew about. There are likely others, Aunt May said. Those who were too ashamed or too defeated to speak out. Gregory rose suddenly, moving to a bookshelf. He withdrew an old photo album and handed it to me. You'll need this. Birth certificate, school records, early arrest records, that were later expunged. His real identity, documented. I opened the album with trembling hands. Baby photos, school portraits, family vacations, the normal trappings of a life that had somehow produced the man who had nearly destroyed mine. Why are you helping us? I asked. Gregory's expression hardened. Because he's my son, and I failed to stop him. Because his mother would be heartbroken to see what he's become. And because someone finally needs to hold him accountable. As we prepared to leave, Gregory handed me a sealed envelope. One more thing. When you find him, give him this. Tell him it's from his father. The ferry ride back to Seattle was silent, both Aunt May and I lost in our thoughts. The album rested heavily in my bag, containing the true origin story of the man I'd almost married. My phone buzzed as we approached the Seattle terminal. Ryan's message was brief but urgent. FBI tracked him to Vancouver. International warrant. Being processed. He's running. Ethan, Edward, was slipping away. Despite everything we'd gathered, despite the 5 women united against him, he might still escape justice, unless we moved faster than he anticipated. As we disembarked, I made a decision. Call everyone, I told Aunt May. We're not waiting for the press conference tomorrow. We're going public today, right now, while he's still in transit. Risky, she noted. Without proper preparation. Preparation is a luxury he's counting on us needing, I cut in. His entire strategy relies on calculated timing. We need to disrupt that calculation. Within an hour, I stood outside my Pioneer Square office building, flanked by Diana, Jessica, Vanessa, and Michelle. News cameras gathered quickly. Ethan's courthouse statement had already made us newsworthy. Now we would seize that spotlight, for our own purposes. My name is Olivia Chen, I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Yesterday, I was portrayed as an unstable woman who attacked her fiancé out of business jealousy. Today, I'm standing with 4 other women who have similar stories about the same man, a professional con artist who has operated under multiple identities, including Edward Ratcliffe, Eric Reeves, Evan Reynolds, and most recently, Ethan Reynolds. One by one, the women stepped forward to tell their stories. Dates, companies, financial losses, evidence of fraud, all presented with calm precision rather than emotional drama. "We are not victims seeking sympathy," Diana concluded. "We are witnesses presenting evidence of a pattern of criminal behavior that has continued for too long." As cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions, my phone lit up with a text. From an unknown number. "Clever move, sweetheart, but this game isn't over." Ethan had seen our press conference, which meant he was still monitoring Seattle news, still connected to the life he'd built here, still within reach, if we moved quickly enough. I looked at the women beside me, each strong in her own way, each determined in her own right. Separately, we had been targets. Together, we had become hunters. And our quarry had just revealed his position. The text from Ethan, Edward, whatever his real name was, lingered on my screen as we retreated to my office. Seattle's infamous rain had returned with a vengeance, pounding against the windows like an omen. Ryan paced near my desk, coordinating with FBI contacts, while Zoe worked the phones with prosecutors. Diana, Jessica, Vanessa, and Michelle clustered around a conference table, mapping connections between their cases. "He's watching us," I said, showing them the message, "which means he hasn't left the country yet." "Or he's using a VPN," Michelle countered, the most technically savvy of our group, making it appear he's still local while actually being in Canada. "Either way, he's rattled," Diana noted, studying the text. "You wouldn't have gotten this message if our press conference hadn't hit a nerve." Ryan hung up his phone with a decisive gesture. "FBI says Border Patrol has no record of anyone matching his description crossing into Canada in the last 24 hours. "That doesn't mean much," Jessica pointed out. "He has multiple identities, probably multiple passports." "True, but they're monitoring all his known aliases," Ryan replied. "And facial recognition is running at all major crossings." Aunt May, who had been quietly observing from a corner, finally spoke. "He will not run yet. His pride won't allow it." 5 pairs of eyes turned toward her. "Explain," Diana prompted. "A man like this, a hunter, doesn't abandon his territory while challenged. To flee now would be to admit defeat, to acknowledge that 5 women outsmarted him." Aunt May's gaze swept over us. "No, he will attempt to reassert control first, to prove his superiority." "She's right," Michelle said slowly. "That fits his psychological profile. Each time he's been exposed in the past, he's attempted some kind of countermove before disappearing." My phone buzzed again. Another text from the same unknown number. "Turn on channel 4. Ryan grabbed the remote, switching on the office television. The local news was mid-broadcast, but the chyron at the bottom made my stomach drop. "Tech founder claims conspiracy. Whistleblower comes forward." Ethan stood at a podium in what appeared to be a hotel conference room, looking appropriately grave. Beside him stood a familiar face that took me a moment to place. Trevor Morgan, Pinnacles, head of product development. "These allegations are not just false, they're malicious," Ethan was saying, his voice carrying that perfect note of restrained indignation. "Olivia Chen and her associates have orchestrated a campaign to destroy Pinnacle Tech because our breakthrough technology threatens existing investments in her portfolio." Trevor nodded earnestly beside him. "I've worked closely with Ethan for 2 years developing this platform. The technology is real, the clinical data is valid, and Ms. Chen has been attempting to gain control of our patents for months." The camera cut to a reporter. "Mr. Reynolds, what about the other women who have come forward with similar allegations?" Ethan's expression shifted to one of pained compassion. "Each of those relationships ended for different reasons. What they share is that all these women are connected to competing technologies or investment firms that would benefit from Pinnacle's failure. This isn't coincidence, it's corporate espionage. He's flipping the entire narrative, Zoe muttered, painting all of you as a conspiracy of competitors. Trevor Morgan, I said, the betrayal fresh and sharp. I personally recruited him from Stanford Medical, paid for his relocation to Seattle, set him up with a generous compensation package. Let me guess, Diana said grimly. He and Ethan became close friends. I nodded. Inseparable. Trevor was best man at our engagement party. Then he either believes Ethan's lies or he's complicit, Jessica reasoned. Either way, he's providing technical credibility that Ethan desperately needs right now. On screen, Ethan was now displaying slides of what he claimed were Pinnacle's proprietary technology, complex diagrams and impressive-looking data visualizations that would convince most viewers, but that I knew were hollow. We need to get the actual Pinnacle technical team on record, Ryan suggested. The engineers who've been trying to implement this vapor technology. Many of them have already reached out, I confirmed. They're willing to testify that the platform doesn't work, as claimed, but they're afraid of industry blacklisting. Fear, Aunt May observed. Always his weapon of choice. My phone rang, Warren Blackwell from the Pinnacle board. I put him on speaker. Olivia, the board is splitting. Half believe Reynolds, half are waiting for more evidence. Trevor Morgan's support has swayed several key members. Trevor is either deceived or part of the fraud, I replied. We're gathering Pinnacle's actual development team to testify about the technology's true state. Work quickly, Warren advised. Reynolds has called for an emergency board vote to remove you as investor of record, claiming conflict of interest and corporate espionage. The vote is scheduled for tomorrow morning. After the call ended, silence filled the office. The rain intensified outside, matching the darkening mood inside. He's trying to cut you off from Pinnacle completely, Diana said finally. Just like he did to me with Foster Diagnostics. If he succeeds, he'll control the narrative about the company's technology. And without Pinnacle as evidence, your fraud case weakens significantly, Zoe added. I felt a cold clarity descend over me. This isn't just about escape anymore. He's fighting back. Good, Michelle said unexpectedly. When they fight back, they make mistakes. Ryan's phone chimed with an alert. FBI has a location. Hotel Fairview downtown. They're preparing to move in. No, I said immediately. That's exactly what he expects. A public arrest, cameras catching everything, Ethan playing the persecuted innovator being silenced by powerful interests. What's the alternative? Ryan demanded. Let him keep controlling the narrative? We control it, I said, an idea forming. But not through more press conferences or public statements. We need to reach the one audience he cares about most. Investors, Diana realized following my thought. Precisely. Pinnacle's investors, potential partners, the entire Seattle tech community. I turned to Zoe. How quickly can we convene a private investor summit? On what pretense? Emergency. Disclosure of material information affecting Pinnacle's valuation. We're obligated to inform stakeholders. Zoe considered this. It's unorthodox, but legally sound. We could have something together by tomorrow morning. Perfect timing to preempt his board vote, Ryan noted. But how do we ensure he shows up? He'll suspect a trap. We don't need him there, I said. We need Trevor Morgan. Michelle raised an eyebrow. The loyal lieutenant? Who has actual technical knowledge Ethan lacks, I explained. If we can get Trevor alone, make him understand he's being used as a shield. He might flip, Diana finished. It's risky. Everything about this is risky, I countered. But Trevor has one thing Ethan doesn't, a legitimate career he's worked hard to build. If he realizes he's about to lose that by defending a fraud. Aunt May nodded approvingly. Divide and conquer. Wise strategy. By midnight, the plan was in motion. Zoe had secured the conference center at the Four Seasons for 8 a.m., 2 hours before Ethan's scheduled board vote. Ryan coordinated with FBI agents who would be present, but inconspicuous. The women divided tasks, Diana reaching out to investors, Michelle preparing technical materials, Jessica and Vanessa gathering witness statements from Pinnacle employees. I found myself alone in my office, staring at Seattle's rain-blurred skyline, when a soft knock announced Aunt May's presence. "You should rest," she advised, placing a cup of tea beside me. "Too much to do," I replied, though exhaustion pulled at every cell in my body. The warrior who enters battle exhausted has already accepted defeat. I smiled despite myself. Is that an ancient Chinese proverb? "No," she said with rare humor. "Just common sense." I sipped the tea, allowing its warmth to seep into my bones. I keep thinking about who he really is, Edward. The boy in those photos Gregory showed us. Where did that person go? How did he become Ethan? Perhaps he was always becoming Ethan, Aunt May suggested. Some people are born with a hollow space where conscience should reside. But Gregory seemed normal, decent even. And the mother died when the boy was 12, she reminded me. Trauma shapes us all, Nyang. Some it strengthens, others it twists. I thought of the photograph I'd seen in Gregory's album, a skinny boy with serious eyes standing beside his mother's hospital bed. Had that moment been the turning point? The beginning of Edward's transformation into a predator? I almost married him, Aunt May. I would have bound my life to someone who doesn't even exist. She touched my hand lightly. But you did not. Your instincts protected you, even when your heart was compromised. My phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. "Clever move with the investor summit. Trevor says hello." Ice flooded my veins. He knows. About tomorrow. Aunt May's expression remained calm. Good. Good? How is this good? Because now we know with certainty there is a leak. Someone in this building, someone we've spoken with today, is communicating with him. Shao. Realization hit like a physical blow. Someone I trusted was betraying us to Ethan. "We need to find out who," I started, reaching for my phone. Aunt May placed her hand over mine. "No, we need to use this." "How?" "By controlling what information we share, and with whom." Her eyes glittered with strategic calculation. "Let us feed the snake false mice and see which way it slithers." Dawn broke with rare sunlight streaming through Seattle's cloud cover. I'd managed 3 hours of fitful sleep on the office couch before the team reconvened. No one mentioned the potential leak. Aunt May had advised keeping that knowledge restricted to us alone while we implemented our counter-strategy. "The investor summit is confirmed," Zoe reported. 43 attendees representing 89% of Pinnacle's capital investment. Most were already in town for the quarterly review scheduled later this week. "Trevor?" I asked. "Confirmed as well," Ryan answered. "He thinks he's presenting Pinnacle's latest technical achievements." Ethan declined, but fully supports Trevor, representing their shared vision. I nodded, unsurprised. He's keeping his distance, letting Trevor take any potential fall. "Which tells us something important," Diana added. "Trevor may not be a willing accomplice. He might genuinely believe in the technology. Either way, he's the key," I said. Without his technical credibility, Ethan's narrative collapses. We moved to the Four Seasons in separate vehicles, taking different routes as a precaution. Michelle monitored digital channels for any sign of Ethan's movements, while Jessica and Vanessa stationed themselves strategically to intercept Trevor before he entered the main conference room. I adjusted my suit jacket, a power move in Valentino red rather than my usual understated neutrals. Today wasn't about blending in or playing nice. Today was about commanding attention and reclaiming narrative control. "Ready?" Ryan asked as We approached the conference room doors. "As I'll ever be," I replied. The room hushed as I entered, all eyes tracking my movement to the podium. These were Seattle's tech elite, venture capitalists, angel investors, corporate development executives, all connected to Pinnacle either directly or through associated interests, all now uncertain about their investments, their reputations, their judgment. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "As majority shareholder in Pinnacle Technologies, I have a fiduciary duty to disclose material information affecting the company's valuation and future prospects." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Several people checked their phones, no doubt seeing the news alerts about yesterday's competing press conferences. "You've all seen the allegations and counter-allegations in the media. Today isn't about those personal matters. Today is about facts, evidence, and your investments." The door opened, and Jessica escorted Trevor Morgan inside. He looked uncomfortable, clutching his presentation materials like a shield. "Mr. Morgan will be joining us momentarily," I continued smoothly. "But first, I want to introduce some other individuals with relevant expertise." On cue, 4 senior engineers from Pinnacle's development team entered from a side door. Trevor's eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed in suspicion. "These are the architects of Pinnacle's actual technology platform," I explained. "The people who've been attempting to implement the vision you've all invested in." One by one, they presented their findings: technical assessments, development timelines, failed implementation attempts, and the growing gap between what had been promised to investors and what could actually be delivered. Trevor shifted uncomfortably in his seat as his colleagues laid bare the reality behind Pinnacle's glossy presentations. When they finished, I invited him to the podium. "Mr. Morgan, would you care to respond to your colleague's assessment?" He approached slowly, conflict evident in every movement. "These are complex technical challenges we're addressing. All revolutionary technology faces implementation hurdles." "Trevor," I said gently, "these aren't hurdles. According to your own team, the core technology as described to investors simply doesn't work as claimed. The AI diagnostic engine fails basic validation tests. The distributed database architecture can't secure patient data as promised." His professional pride visibly warred with his loyalty to Ethan. "We're making progress," Ethan has assured me. "Additional resources are coming that will accelerate development." "Like the Singapore research team?" I asked. Trevor blinked in surprise. "Yes, exactly. Their work on neural network optimization is promising." "Trevor, there is no Singapore team. The office address is a virtual mailbox. The research papers, cited in your technical documentation, were written by an AI text generator. I had experts analyze them. They contain plausible-sounding technical language but describe impossible processes." Color drained from his face. "That's not—" Ethan showed me their work, their credentials. Michelle stood, tablet in hand. "May I approach?" At my nod, she joined us at the podium, showing Trevor her screen. "These are the supposed team members' LinkedIn profiles. Every profile photo is an AI-generated image. Note the telltale signs: asymmetrical glasses, odd ear placements, background inconsistencies." Trevor stared at the evidence, his entire worldview visibly crumbling. He said they preferred anonymity because of the breakthrough nature of their work, that they'd faced corporate espionage before. "There's more," I said quietly, gesturing for Ryan to join us. "Ethan Reynolds isn't who he claims to be. His real name is Edward Ratcliffe. He has a pattern of creating fraudulent tech companies, securing investment through deception, and disappearing with the funds." Ryan distributed folders containing Gregory Ratcliffe's documentation, along with FBI case summaries of Edward's previous frauds. Trevor sank into a chair, flipping through pages with increasing dismay. "The board vote scheduled for this morning," he said finally, looking up with new clarity in his eyes. He was going to use it to authorize a transfer of intellectual property to a new holding company. Said it was for tax purposes. A holding company that he exclusively controls, I confirmed. The final step before disappearing with whatever assets he could liquidate. Trevor closed the folder decisively. What do you need from me? The truth, I said simply. Your testimony about how he manipulated technical information, made promises he knew couldn't be fulfilled, and systematically deceived investors and employees alike. He nodded, a man coming to terms with his own unwitting complicity. I'll tell them everything. For the next hour, Trevor laid bare the internal workings of Pinnacle, the technical promises made to investors without consulting the development team, the pressure to present prototypes that were barely functional, the constant assurances that breakthrough technology was just around the corner. When he finished, the room sat in stunned silence. Millions of dollars had been invested based on fraudulent claims. Careers and reputations had been staked on Pinnacle's supposed innovation. Where do we go from here? Asked Janet Weiss, representing one of the largest venture capital firms in the Pacific Northwest. That's why we're all here, I replied. Pinnacle was built on a fraudulent foundation, but the core mission, making healthcare more accessible through technology, remains valid. The question is whether we collectively believe that mission is worth salvaging, and if so, how we restructure to achieve it honestly. What followed was unlike any investor meeting I'd ever attended: raw, emotional, pragmatic, and ultimately hopeful. These were experienced business people who had been deceived but were now determined to find a way forward. By the time we broke for lunch, a framework had emerged. Ethan would be removed as CEO, Trevor would lead a complete technical reassessment, and I would step back from majority control to address potential conflicts of interest. A new board would be established with greater technical oversight and transparency requirements. As people filtered out for lunch, my phone buzzed with a message from Vanessa. He's here. Lobby. Not alone. My heart raced as I showed the message to Ryan and Zoe. The FBI? On standby, Ryan confirmed, but making a scene in the Four Seasons lobby isn't ideal. No, I agreed. Let's take this somewhere more private. I texted Vanessa back. Penthouse conference room. Bring him up. Minutes later, the elevator doors opened to reveal Ethan, flanked by two men who radiated hired muscle rather than legal representation. His confident smile faltered slightly when he saw me standing alone in the center of the empty conference room. Olivia, he said, voice warm with false concern. This has gone far enough, don't you think? All these public accusations dragging both our names through the mud. Edward, I replied, using his real name deliberately. Or do you prefer Eric? Evan? I'm having trouble keeping track. His eyes hardened, though the smile remained fixed. Cute. Did Gregory enjoy his little chat with you? My father always did. Love playing the righteous victim. He gave me something for you, actually. I reached into my bag, withdrawing the sealed envelope Gregory had entrusted to me. Curiosity overcame caution. Ethan stepped forward, gesturing for his companions to wait, and took the envelope. He opened it, scanning its contents. Whatever. He read there caused a brief flicker of emotion, so fast I almost missed it. Sentimental old fool, he muttered, stuffing the letter back into the envelope. What did he say? I couldn't help asking. Ethan's smile turned genuine for the first time, sardonic and cold. That he forgives me. Can you believe that? After everything, he forgives me. He laughed, a hollow sound. As if I wanted his forgiveness. What do you want, Edward? Why are you here? He gestured expansively. To negotiate, of course. This situation has become unnecessarily adversarial. We both know how these things work. Messy public accusations, lengthy legal battles where only the attorneys win. There's a cleaner way to resolve this. I'm listening, I said, playing for time as Ryan and Zoe quietly entered through a side door. Simple. You withdraw your accusations. I step down from Pinnacle citing personal reasons, and we both walk away with our reputations intact. The company restructures under new leadership. Perhaps Trevor, he seems to have your confidence. And investors get their promising healthcare platform. And the money you've already diverted? I asked. The falsified research? The other women? You've defrauded? He waved dismissively. Financial irregularities discovered during transition, blamed on accounting errors. Technical setbacks framed as ambitious goals requiring recalibration. As for the others, he shrugged. Their claims become less credible once the primary accuser recants. You've thought this through, I observed. I always do. His confidence was returning, his natural charisma reasserting itself. It's the sensible solution, Olivia. Clean, controlled, minimal damage to everyone involved, including you. Especially me, he admitted without shame. Self-interest is the most reliable motivator. Surely a successful investor understands that. I studied him, this man I'd almost married, trying to see past the mask to whatever lay beneath. What about the next woman, Edward? The next company? The next fraud? Something dark flickered in his eyes. There's always a next one, sweetheart. That's how the world works. Predators and prey, hunters and hunted. I just happen to be very good at the game. It's not a game, I said quietly. These are people's lives, their dreams, their trust, their futures. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to an intimate murmur. You weren't complaining when I was fulfilling your dreams. The perfect partner who understood your ambition, supported your vision, matched your intensity. I gave you exactly what you wanted, Olivia. I always do. The truth of his words stung. He had been perfect, a meticulous construction designed specifically for me, based on careful study of my preferences, ambitions, and desires. That's the real reason you're angry, he continued, pressing his advantage. Not because I deceived you, but because I was everything you wanted. And now you know that perfect man doesn't exist. He never did. For a moment, I felt the pull of his reality bending. Charisma, the insidious way he twisted truth into weapons. Then I remembered Diana's hollow eyes when she spoke of losing everything, Michelle's grim determination after years of searching for justice, Gregory's weathered face as he handed over evidence against his own son. You're wrong, I said finally. I'm not angry because you weren't real. I'm angry because you could have been. You have the intelligence, the charm, the vision to actually build something meaningful. Instead, you chose this hollow existence, moving from con to con, leaving destruction in your wake. Something genuine flashed across his face. Surprise, perhaps even a trace of regret. Then the mask reasserted itself. Very touching, but sentiment doesn't change my offer. What's your answer? Partnership or mutual destruction? Before I could respond, the door opened again. Trevor Morgan entered, followed by Diana, Jessica, Vanessa, and Michelle. Behind them came Warren Blackwell and several other Pinnacle board members. Ethan's composure faltered momentarily before he recovered, shifting seamlessly into his charismatic founder persona. Trevor, perfect timing. Olivia and I were just discussing a restructuring plan that would elevate you to a more prominent technical leadership role. Trevor stepped forward, no longer the uncertain man from earlier. I heard everything, Ethan, about the Singapore team. That doesn't exist. The technology that doesn't work. Your real identity. Ethan's smile became strained. Misunderstandings that we're working to clarify. No more lies, Trevor cut him off. The board just voted unanimously to remove you as CEO and file formal fraud charges. It's over. Ethan's eyes darted around the room, assessing exits, allies, options. His guards tensed, sensing the shift in dynamics. No one's leaving, Ryan said calmly from his position by the door. FBI agents are outside, and Seattle PD has the building exits covered. On what charges? Ethan demanded, his charm evaporating to reveal the calculating predator beneath. You have nothing concrete that wouldn't be tied up in courts for years. Wire fraud, Zoe replied clinically. Securities fraud, identity theft, embezzlement from a federally funded medical research grant. Take your pick. And if those somehow fall through, Diana added, there are charges waiting in California and Oregon and New York. Ethan's confidence cracked completely, revealing glimpses of desperation beneath. He turned back to me, voice low and urgent. Olivia, think about what you're doing. I know things about your investment strategy, your offshore accounts, your tax structures. All legal, I interrupted. Unlike yours. Legal, but embarrassing if exposed in court. Do you really want your entire financial life laid bare in public proceedings? Your reputation would never recover. I smiled, feeling strangely calm as I recognized the last desperate move of a cornered opponent. That's the difference between us, Edward. My life can withstand scrutiny. Yours collapses the moment anyone looks closely. His expression hardened into something ugly and authentic. Perhaps the real Edward Ratcliffe finally showing himself. You think you've won? This isn't over. Not by a long shot. As if on cue, the conference room doors opened. FBI agents entered with arrest warrants, reading Edward his rights as they handcuffed him. His hired muscle surrendered without resistance, apparently realizing their employer couldn't protect them anymore. Just before they led him away, Edward paused beside me. You realize I'll be out on bail within hours, he said quietly. And there's nothing stopping me from disappearing completely. Actually, I replied, there is. I held up my phone, showing him a real-time tracker displaying his current location. The watch you're wearing? The one I gave you for our 6-month anniversary? It has a GPS tracker embedded in the band. A precaution I took after Aunt May's. First warning. For the first time, genuine shock registered on his face. You've been tracking me all this time? Only activated it yesterday, I admitted. But it's been there all along, just in case. As they led him toward the elevator, Edwards turned back one last time. You deserve me, you know. We're more alike than you want to admit. Both hunters, both willing to do whatever it takes to win. I met his gaze steadily. The difference is, I don't need to destroy others to succeed. The elevator doors closed on his bitter smile, and suddenly the room felt lighter, as if a toxic presence had been physically removed from the air. Diana approached, understanding in her eyes. It doesn't feel how you expected, does it? Not triumph? Not relief? Just emptiness. And anger, I added. Not at him, strangely enough. At myself, for not seeing through him sooner. Don't, she said firmly. That's exactly what he wants, for you to doubt your own judgment, to carry that uncertainty into every future relationship. Don't give him that power. The others joined. Us, this unlikely sisterhood formed through shared trauma. We had stopped Edward Ratcliffe, but the real work, rebuilding what he had damaged, was just beginning. What happens now? Trevor asked, still processing his own role in the deception. I looked around at this room full of people who had been brought together by one man's fraud, but were now united in something more constructive. Now, I said, we build something real. Edward Ratcliffe made bail by nightfall, just as he had predicted. The GPS tracker in his watch showed him returning to his downtown condo, then making a brief stop at a storage facility before heading to SeaTac Airport. FBI agents intercepted him at the Delta check-in counter, where he was attempting to board a flight to Mexico City using yet another identity. This time, his bail was denied. I should have felt relief. Instead, a strange hollowness persisted as I sat in my Lake Union apartment, watching rain streak the windows while scrolling through an endless stream of news alerts about the case. Pinnacle scandal and tech con artist trended across social media. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from investors, business associates, and reporters seeking statements. Aunt May found me there at midnight, still wearing my Valentino suit from the morning confrontation, an untouched glass of scotch at my elbow. "You should sleep," she said, gently removing the glass. "Tomorrow brings its own battles." "What battles?" I asked, my voice hoarse from disuse. "We caught him. It's over." She gave me a look that managed to convey both compassion and reproach. "The serpent is caged, but its venom still spreads." As if confirming her words, my phone lit up with an alert from Horizon Ventures' PR team. "Urgent. Statement needed offshore investment structures mentioned in Ratcliffe court filings." "He's already started," I realized, showing her the message. "Using what he knows about my business to create doubt and distraction." "Of course." Aunt May sat beside me. "He warned you he would." She was right. Edward had made it clear this was just the beginning. Even from behind bars, he could damage my reputation, my business, and my future by strategically revealing selected truths mixed with calculated lies. "My investment structures are all legal," I said, more to reassure myself than Aunt May. "Legal, yes, but designed for privacy, not transparency. In the court of public opinion, privacy looks like secrecy, and secrecy suggests wrongdoing." Her expression softened. "You have built walls to protect your business, Nyang. Necessary walls. But now those same walls cast shadows that he can use against you." She was right again. My offshore accounts, shell corporations, and complex investment structures, standard practice for high-level investors, could easily be portrayed as suspicious when selectively described in court documents. "What do I do?" I asked, suddenly feeling the exhaustion of the past days catching up to me. "You get ahead of it," came Ryan's voice from the doorway. He entered, looking as tired as I felt, but energized with purpose. "Zoe's already drafting a comprehensive disclosure statement. Everything about your investment structures, tax strategies, offshore accounts. Total transparency." "That would expose proprietary investment strategies," I protested. "Give competitors insight into Horizon's methodology." "Better than letting Edward control the narrative," Ryan countered. "This way, you disclose on your terms rather than responding to his allegations." Aunt May nodded approval. "When light floods a room, shadows have nowhere to hide." I relented, too exhausted to argue further. "Fine. Get Zoe whatever she needs." Morning arrived with new challenges. Edward had indeed begun his counterattack, with strategic leaks about my investment strategies appearing in financial blogs overnight. The implications were subtle but poisonous, suggesting that my success came from borderline practices and unfair advantages rather than business acumen. By noon, I found myself in Zoe's office with her entire legal team, reviewing the disclosure statement they had prepared. The document laid bare Horizon Ventures' complete investment structure, detailed, technical, and utterly legal, but complex enough to seem suspicious to those inclined toward conspiracy theories. "This will hurt. In the short term," Zoe warned. "Competitors will gain insights they can use. Some investors may get nervous about the publicity. But in the long run, transparency is our best defense," I finished for her. "Release it." As we left Zoe's office, Diana called with more concerning news. "Edward's attorneys are requesting access to all communication between us. Me, Jessica, Vanessa, Michelle, and you. They're claiming we conspired to damage his reputation and business interests." "On what grounds?" I demanded. "They're suggesting our coordinated press conference proves prior conspiracy. They want to paint us as competitors who strategically targeted him." "That's absurd. We didn't even know each other until after his fraud was discovered." "Absurd but effective," Diana replied grimly. "It's creating doubt, which is all he needs. Right now. Throughout the day, Edward's strategy became clearer. He wasn't trying to avoid conviction. The evidence was too overwhelming. Rather, he was muddying the waters, creating enough confusion and counter-narrative to ensure that when he eventually disappeared, as we all knew he would attempt, public interest would have moved on to the next scandal. By evening, the toll became evident in my business relationships. Two major clients requested meetings to discuss recent developments. A potential partnership that had been nearly finalized was suddenly under review. Colleagues who had been friendly for years now maintained professional distance, uncertain whether association with me carried risk. This is exactly what he wants, Ryan fumed as we reviewed the damage reports in my office. To isolate you professionally, just like he did to Diana and the others. It's working, I admitted. The transparent disclosure strategy had gained some positive coverage, but hadn't neutralized the more sensational implications of Edward's leaks. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Not Edward this time, but Gregory Ratcliffe. He's done this before. It will get worse before it gets better. Stay strong. A father still watching his son's destruction from afar, still reaching out to those caught in his wake. I found myself wondering again what had happened to that serious-eyed boy in the hospital photo to transform him into this hollow predator. As if reading my thoughts, Michelle appeared in my office doorway. "I've been digging deeper into Edward's history," she said without preamble. "There's something you should see." She placed her laptop on my desk, displaying scanned police reports from 20 years earlier, juvenile records that should have been sealed, but that her specialist had somehow accessed. "These are from when Edward was 16, she explained, a year after his mother died. He was briefly detained for running. Elaborate scams at his high school, selling fake concert tickets, running gambling operations, creating counterfeit IDs. But the charges were ultimately dropped. Why?" Michelle scrolled to the final page. "Because another student took responsibility. A girl named Sarah Winters." The name registered immediately. "Any relation to Jessica?" "Her younger sister." Michelle's expression was grim. Sarah committed suicide 6 months later. The official report cited academic pressure and depression, but Jessica always believed Edward was somehow involved. "Does Jessica know about this connection?" "Not yet. I found it an hour ago." I leaned back, processing this new information. So his pattern of manipulation and destruction goes back even further than we thought. And he's been letting others take the fall from the beginning. "It gets worse," Michelle continued. "After Sarah's death, Edward transferred to a military academy where his father had connections. 6 months later, he was expelled for running an elaborate cheating ring that implicated several faculty members. Let me guess. He walked away clean while others faced consequences." Michelle nodded. "It's his signature. He creates systems where others are compromised alongside him, ensuring they have as much to lose as he does if the truth comes out." As she spoke, a pattern crystallized in my mind, not just of Edward's methods, but of his fundamental strategy. He doesn't just target individuals, I realized. He creates networks of complicity, everyone slightly stained so no one feels entirely clean enough to fully expose him. "Exactly," Michelle confirmed. "It's why his frauds persist so long. People who might speak out hesitate because they're implicated, however peripherally. And now he's attempting the same with me," I concluded. "Using my investment structures to create the impression of shared ethical flexibility." Michelle closed her laptop decisively. "Which is why transparency alone won't be enough. We need to completely reframe the narrative." "How?" She smiled grimly. "By going on offense." The strategy session lasted well into the night. Michelle, with her background in crisis management, outlined an approach that felt bold, even reckless. But that might be exactly what the situation required. Instead of responding to each allegation defensively, we consolidate everything into a comprehensive case study, she explained. Not just about Edward's fraud, but about how sophisticated predators operate in modern business environments. A case study? Ryan looked skeptical. While we're in the middle of a legal battle? The legal process will take months, possibly years, Michelle countered. In the meantime, Edward is controlling the narrative. This approach lets us reclaim it while providing a public service. Diana, who had joined us via video conference, nodded understanding. It transforms us from victims to educators, from targets to experts. Exactly, Michelle confirmed. We document everything: his technical methods, psychological tactics, how he identified and exploited vulnerabilities in different businesses. We name names, provide evidence, and create a comprehensive playbook for identifying similar frauds. That's not how crisis management usually works, Zoe noted cautiously. Because this isn't a usual crisis, I said, warming to the idea. Edward isn't playing by conventional rules, so conventional responses won't work. By morning, the framework was in place. Each of Edward's victims would document their experience in detail, not as personal stories, but as technical analyses of his methods. Financial experts would trace the money trails. Psychological professionals would examine his manipulation tactics. Technical experts would deconstruct how he created the illusion of viable technology. The result would be published as the Ratcliffe Method, Anatomy of a Modern Confidence Scheme. A comprehensive resource for investors, entrepreneurs, and business leaders to identify similar frauds before they took root. This isn't just about saving our reputations, I explained to the team. It's about ensuring Edward Ratcliffe is his last successful identity. Whatever name he uses next, whatever scheme he attempts, people will recognize his methods. Trevor. Morgan, still processing his own unwitting role in Edward's fraud, volunteered to lead the technical analysis. I need to understand how I was deceived, he explained simply, both for myself and to prevent it from happening to others. Gregory Ratcliffe, contacted by Ryan, agreed to provide historical context. It's time, he said, his voice heavy with resignation. 20 years of enabling through silence ends now. The work proceeded with remarkable speed, driven by shared purpose. Each participant brought unique expertise to the analysis: Diana's experience in medical technology, Jessica's background in financial systems, Vanessa's knowledge of intellectual property, Michelle's cybersecurity skills, and my own understanding of investment structures. Together, we created a comprehensive profile of Edward's methods that was far more damning than any individual accusation could have been. This wasn't about personal grievance, but about systematic, calculated predation across multiple industries and relationships. 2 weeks into the project, as we prepared for the first phase of publication, Edward made his move. Despite heightened security and ankle monitoring, he managed to disable his tracker and disappear from his court-mandated residence. Law enforcement launched an immediate manhunt, but those of us who understood him best knew he had likely been planning this escape since the moment of his arrest. The disappearance sparked renewed media frenzy, with headlines questioning how such a high-profile defendant had evaded supervision. Speculation ran rampant about offshore accounts, disguises, and international escape routes. I received the news while meeting with Pinnacle's newly restructured board. The company had survived Edward's fraud, emerging with a more modest but honest assessment of its technology's potential. The healing process had begun, though trust would take longer to rebuild. This changes nothing about our approach, I told the team when we reconvened that evening. In fact, it makes our work more urgent. Edward Ratcliffe may have disappeared, but his methods remain exposed. The first installment of The Ratcliffe Method was published the following day, a detailed financial analysis of how Edward structured his frauds across multiple identities and companies. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Financial publications reprinted excerpts, industry forums buzzed with discussion, Investment firms requested briefings on identifying similar schemes. Edward's disappearance, rather than undermining our credibility, actually enhanced it. His flight confirmed everything we had documented about his pattern of operation. The calculated exits, the careful preparation, the ability to shed identities like worn clothing. For the first time since the engagement dinner, I felt something, like hope. Edward had escaped justice for now, but his methods had been stripped bare for all to see. Whatever identity he assumed next would face a business community far more alert to his techniques. 3 days after the publication, as I prepared for a series of interviews about the case study, Aunt May appeared in my office with a curious expression. "You have a visitor," she said. "Someone unexpected." A woman entered behind her, elegant, composed, and vaguely familiar, though I couldn't immediately place her. She extended her hand with a gracious smile. "Sarah Winters." She introduced herself, though I haven't used that name in 20 years. The name registered instantly. The girl from Edward's high school, Jessica's supposedly dead sister. "But you're dead?" She smiled without humor. Edward has always found that particular fiction useful. It provides such convenient emotional leverage. My mind raced to process this revelation. "Jessica believes you committed suicide. She's carried that grief for decades." Sarah's composed facade cracked slightly. "I know. That guilt has been difficult to bear. But necessary, I thought, for both our protection." "Protection from what?" "From Edward." She sank into a chair, suddenly looking exhausted. "Or Eric, or Ethan, or whatever he's calling himself now. I assumed if he believed I was dead, he would leave Jessica alone." "I don't understand," I said, trying to make sense of her story. "What happened 20 years ago?" Sarah's gaze turned inward, revisiting memories she had clearly tried to bury. "Edward and I were involved in high school. He was brilliant, magnetic. Everyone wanted his attention, but he chose me. Or so I thought." "What changed?" "I discovered he was using my family connections to run elaborate scams. My father was on the board of several companies. Access Edward exploited through me. When authorities started investigating, he manipulated everything to implicate me instead of himself." "And you took the fall," I finished, remembering the police reports Michelle had found. She nodded. "I was 17, infatuated and terrified. He convinced me it would be a minor mark on my juvenile record, while for him, with his previous issues, it would mean serious consequences." "But that doesn't explain the suicide deception?" "That came later. After the charges, Edward's hold over me grew stronger. He isolated me from friends, monitored my communications with family, including Jessica. It was classic emotional abuse, though I didn't recognize it then." She paused, collecting herself before continuing. "When I finally tried to break free, he threatened to reveal additional criminal activity that would implicate not just me, but my father. Evidence he'd manufactured, but that looked convincing." "So you disappeared instead," I guessed. "With my father's help, we staged the suicide, created a new identity, relocated to Europe. It was extreme, but we were desperate to escape Edward's control. And Jessica never knew the truth." Pain flashed across Sarah's face. "The hardest part. My father believed the fewer people who knew, the safer we would be. Jessica was only 14. Too young, he thought, to keep such a dangerous secret." "But now you're here," I observed. "Because of your case study," she explained. "A colleague forwarded it to me, not knowing my connection, just aware of my interest in financial fraud prevention. When I saw Edward's methods so clearly documented, familiar even after 20 years, I realized he was still doing exactly what he did to me, and that perhaps my silence had enabled that continuation. I studied her carefully, processing the implications of her story. "You're the missing piece. Your testimony would strengthen the case against him significantly. I know, she said quietly. That's why I'm here. It's time to end the cycle. For Jessica. For all the others who came after me. Including those we don't yet know about, I added. Sarah nodded grimly. There will be others. Edward views relationships as tactical operations, not human connections. Every person is either useful or irrelevant to his objectives. Her insight into Edward's psychology struck a chord. This was someone who had known him before he fully developed his predatory methodology, who had witnessed the formative stages of his manipulation tactics. Would you be willing to contribute to the case study? I asked. Your perspective would add a crucial dimension, the early development of his methods. That's partly why I've come forward, she confirmed. But first, I need to reveal the truth to Jessica. 20 years is too long to let her believe I'm dead. I didn't envy her that conversation. She's currently in San Francisco, working with other investors Edward defrauded. I can arrange for her to come to Seattle immediately. As Sarah left to prepare for her reunion with her sister, Aunt May regarded me thoughtfully. The past never remains buried, she observed. It rises like groundwater after heavy rain, finding every crack in the foundations we build. Is that a bad thing? I wondered aloud. Not always, she replied. Sometimes old wounds must reopen to heal properly. Sarah and Jessica's reunion. The following day was private, raw, and ultimately healing, at least according to Ryan, who provided moral support through the difficult disclosure. Jessica's initial shock and anger gradually transformed into relief and tentative joy as she absorbed the truth that her sister had been alive all these years. With Sarah's permission, we added her story to the Ratcliffe Method, providing crucial insight into Edward's earliest manipulation tactics. Her testimony created a complete evolutionary timeline of his methods, from teenage schemes to sophisticated corporate fraud. 3 days later, as the second installment of the case study was published, the FBI received an unexpected lead. A luxury resort in Puerto Vallarta reported a guest matching Edward's description who had checked in under the name Thomas Reed. Local authorities placed the resort under surveillance while awaiting extradition paperwork. But Edward, ever alert to pursuit, vanished before they could move in. Security camera footage showed him departing via private boat hours before authorities arrived. The FBI's international manhunt continued, now with Mexican authorities fully engaged. He's running scared, Diana observed during our daily update call. Changing locations frequently, using new identities with each move. That's expensive and exhausting to maintain. And every identity he burns makes the next one harder to establish, Michelle added. His usual method is to build personas carefully over time. This rapid shifting makes him vulnerable. I wasn't convinced. Edward adapts quickly. He'll find a new approach. But with significantly fewer resources, Ryan pointed out. The FBI has frozen most of his known accounts. His support network has been exposed. His methodology is now public knowledge. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider that Edward might actually face consequences for his actions. Not just legal penalties if captured, but the fundamental destruction of his operational methodology. A confidence man without confidence, a predator whose hunting patterns had been mapped and shared with potential prey. That evening, as Seattle's perpetual rain paused briefly to reveal a watercolor sunset over the Sound, I stood at my apartment window reflecting on the transformation of the past month. The woman who had trustingly worn Edward's engagement ring seemed like a stranger now, naive in ways I could barely comprehend from my current perspective. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown international number. Impressive work with the case study. You always were my most interesting project. Until next time. E. I showed the message to Ryan and Aunt May, who had joined me for dinner. He's still tracking our activities, Ryan noted with concern. Still feeling confident enough to reach out. No, Aunt May disagreed. This is not confidence. This is desperation disguised as bravado. A truly confident predator does not announce himself to prey that has escaped. I considered her assessment, finding truth in it. He needs the last word, needs to believe he still has some control over the narrative. Then let him believe it, she advised, while we continue dismantling his world piece by piece. I didn't respond to Edward's message. Instead, I focused on finalizing the third installment of The Ratcliffe Method, a comprehensive guide to identifying and preventing similar frauds in the future. This section included contributions from financial regulators, forensic accountants, and cybersecurity experts who had studied Edward's techniques. What had begun as a defensive measure against Edward's attacks on my reputation had evolved into something far more significant, a collaborative effort to inoculate the business community against predators like him. Diana had started similar initiatives in medical technology circles, while Jessica focused on venture capital networks. Vanessa developed training for intellectual property attorneys, and Michelle created digital security protocols specifically designed to flag Edward's preferred methods. Together, we were building a shield that would make his preferred hunting grounds increasingly hostile territory. 2 weeks later, Seattle PD received a puzzling delivery addressed to me, a small package containing Edward's engagement ring and a brief handwritten note. "Keep this as a souvenir. You've earned it. Consider us even." Forensics found no usable fingerprints or DNA, no clues to Edward's location. But the message was clear. He was moving on, abandoning this identity completely, accepting that this particular game had ended in defeat. Is it really over? Ryan wondered as we examined the ring in its evidence bag. This chapter is, I replied. But Edward will reinvent himself, start fresh somewhere new with lessons learned from his failures here. Then we must ensure those lessons follow him, Aunt May said firmly. The fourth installment of your case study should be distributed internationally, translated into multiple languages. If he seeks hunting grounds abroad, we must prepare those territories as well. She was right, as usual. Edward's particular brand of fraud transcended borders and industries. His next identity might emerge anywhere in the global business ecosystem. That night, as I prepared for bed, my phone buzzed with a final alert. Gregory Ratcliffe had sent a brief message. He contacted me, wanted money for a fresh start. I refused. He's running low on resources. A small victory, but significant. Edward's support networks were collapsing one by one, his options narrowing with each exposed identity and frozen account. I stood at my window watching Seattle's rain return, gentle at first, then building to a cleansing downpour. Somewhere out there, Edward Ratcliffe was reconstructing himself piece by piece, shedding the identity I had known like an outgrown skin. He would emerge as someone new, someone carefully crafted to gain trust, admiration, and ultimately, control. But he would carry with him the knowledge that he had been seen, truly seen, and that his methods had been exposed for all to recognize. He would operate knowing that a network of informed individuals was actively working to identify and neutralize his particular brand of predation. For the first time since that moment when his hand had connected with my face at our engagement, dinner, I felt something like peace. Not because the danger had passed entirely, but because I had transformed from target to hunter, from victim to educator, from isolated mark to connected node in a network of awareness. Edward had slapped me at our engagement dinner, thinking it would silence and control me. Instead, it had awakened something he hadn't anticipated, a determination, not just to escape his fraud, but to ensure it never succeeded again. The ring he had returned sat in its evidence bag on my nightstand, not as a souvenir of what I had lost, but as a reminder of what I had found. Strength I hadn't known I possessed, allies I wouldn't have met otherwise, and purpose that transcended my personal experience. Rain streamed down my windows, washing Seattle clean in the darkness. Tomorrow would bring new challenges in the ongoing effort to track Edward and prevent future frauds. But tonight, in this moment, I allowed myself to acknowledge a simple, powerful truth. He had not broken me. He had not won. And he never would. 6 months passed with no confirmed sightings of Edward Ratcliffe. The FBI maintained their international manhunt, but the trail had gone cold. Life in Seattle gradually returned to a new normal, one forever changed by what had happened, but moving forward nonetheless. Pinnacle Technology, restructured under Trevor Morgan's leadership, had refocused on achievable healthcare innovations. The company abandoned Edward's grandiose promises in favor of practical solutions that actually worked. Though smaller than originally envisioned, it was built on honesty rather than fraud. I divided my time between rebuilding Horizon Ventures' reputation and speaking at financial security conferences about the Ratcliffe Method, which had been published in 12 languages and adopted as required reading in several business schools. Diana, Jessica, Vanessa, Michelle, Sarah, and I had formed an informal consultancy, helping organizations identify potential fraud before it took root. On a rare, sunny autumn afternoon, I sat with Aunt May on the deck of her Mercer Island home, watching sailboats glide across Lake Washington. "Gregory Ratcliffe died last night," she said without preamble, handing me her tablet displaying the obituary. "Heart failure." I scrolled through the sparse details. A private service, no flowers, donations to a fraud prevention charity we had. Established. "Do you think Edward knows?" I asked. "I believe he will sense it, as wolves sense changes in their territory even from great distance." She poured more tea with practiced precision. "The question is whether it will draw him out." 3 days later, we had our answer. Security cameras at a Seattle cemetery captured a solitary figure visiting Gregory's fresh grave, a man with dyed hair and a beard, but unmistakably Edward. By the time authorities arrived, he had vanished again, leaving only a single white rose and a handwritten note. "You were right after all." The FBI enhanced the security footage, adding it to their file. Facial recognition confirmed Edward had altered his appearance, but not enough to completely disguise his identity. An uncharacteristic mistake for someone usually so meticulous about his disguises. "He's slipping," Diana observed when I shared the updates. "Getting careless." "Or deliberate," I countered, playing a different game now. A week after the cemetery visit, a package arrived at my office, a manuscript titled The Confidence Game, a Memoir, by E.R. Thomas. The accompanying note read simply, "My side of the story. Publish it or bury it. Your choice. Consider it reparation." The manuscript proved to be Edward's autobiography, a detailed account of his evolution from troubled teenager to sophisticated con artist. Unlike his usual manipulations, the text contained brutal honesty about his methods, motivations, and the emotional vacuum at his core. He described himself as a perfect mirror, reflecting back whatever others wished to see while remaining empty behind the glass. After consultation with the FBI and legal advisors, we decided to publish the manuscript with extensive annotation, fact-checking his claims, providing context for his admissions, and including responses from those he had defrauded. The proceeds would go to the victim restitution fund we had established. Why would he do this? Ryan wondered as we reviewed the edited manuscript. It's essentially a confession. Because it gives him what he's always craved, significance, I replied, understanding Edward's psychology better than I cared to admit. If he can't be remembered as a brilliant entrepreneur, he'll be remembered as a brilliant predator. Either way, he refuses to be forgotten. The book, published under the title Mirror Man, The Annotated Confessions of a Modern Con Artist, became an unlikely bestseller. Law enforcement agencies ordered copies for training purposes. Psychology departments studied it as a rare first-person account of sociopathic behavior. Edward's victims, myself included, found a strange catharsis in seeing his methods so nakedly exposed, by his own hand, no less. On the 1-year anniversary of our ill-fated engagement party, I received a final message. A postcard from Buenos Aires with no return address. The hunter becomes philosopher. Turns out there's freedom in surrender. Forensics confirmed. It was genuinely from Edward, suggesting he had fled to Argentina. The FBI coordinated with Interpol, but I suspected he was already elsewhere, having left this breadcrumb deliberately. That evening, as I removed the last of Edward's belongings from my storage closet, items I had finally decided to donate to charity, I found a small velvet box I didn't recognize. Inside was not jewelry, but a single key with a numbered tag. It took some investigation, but Ryan eventually traced it to a safe deposit box in a Zurich bank. After complicated legal proceedings, the box was opened to reveal documents detailing all of Edward's remaining accounts, assets, and identities. Everything needed to make full restitution to his victims. Attached was a handwritten note. Consider, this my plea bargain. I keep my freedom, you get the money. Seems fair. The total assets recovered exceeded $15 million, enough to repay his victims with interest. Whether this act of restitution stemmed from genuine remorse or simply a calculated decision to end the pursuit remains unknown. Perhaps it was both, the closest thing to conscience a man like Edward could manage. I never heard from him again, though occasionally reports surface of similar cons in distant countries. Whether these are Edward's work or merely imitators is impossible to determine. The man I knew, or thought I knew, has become something of an urban legend in financial circles, a cautionary tale told to naive investors. As for me, I've found unexpected purpose in the aftermath of deception. The network we built to expose, Edward now helps others identify and escape similar predators. From destruction came creation, a system of protection for potential victims, a community of survivors supporting each other. Sometimes I still dream of him, not Edward the fraud, but Ethan the illusion, the perfect partner designed specifically to appeal to me. In waking hours, I recognize the artifice, but in dreams, I occasionally mourn what never actually existed. Those moments of vulnerability remind me that healing isn't linear, that trust, once shattered, rebuilds itself in different patterns. That the most valuable lesson from my engagement to a phantom was learning to see clearly, not just others, but myself. The slap that echoed through the Emerald Room that night was meant to silence me. Instead, it became the sound of illusion shattering, of truth breaking through, of a life-changing course toward something more authentic than I could have imagined. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.